Hello everyone, hopefully you can see me. I just managed to click on the screen and lose everyone completely, which is just a wonderful start. But anyway, I guess that's the new normal that we're all living in. So a very warm welcome to you all to our Brave conversation with Sara Bennison. We're particularly excited about this. We've been trying to get this lady to speak to us for ages, so we're really delighted that she's agreed. And it's really quite cool that we're both at home and we're going to get to have a really special conversation. So as you know, our focus has been threefold in this new normal that we all find ourselves in: our well-being, staying inspired and connected and motivated, and most importantly, staying connected. So we're trying lots of new formats on our members, and they seem to be really well received. And today we haven't done this virtually yet, so let's see how we go. But we'd love your feedback as always at the end. So today, as many of you would have been to our physical events where we've hosted Brave Conversations under the spotlights, today is a no holds barred, no script, no PowerPoint, just a conversation between two people where you'll get to hear from an exceptional brave marketing leader. So before I introduce Sara, just want to see how everyone's doing. So as we've done before, use the chat function to let us know how you're feeling in one word and where you're calling in from, because we're loving the fact that this is becoming truly global. So if we just start doing the chat, that'd be awesome. And then also it means we can check that the chat is going well and everyone can, we can see it. We'll be using this for the interactivity with this event. And also, yes, we've got Optimistic in New York. Hi Fiona, nice to see you. Dubai energized, that's my word actually, energized, because I'm looking forward to this conversation. Joining from Dubai, feeling good. Lovely. So we've got some really good words coming in from Teddington. That's where the society's based. Feeling good. Lovely. Guilty. Why are you guilty, Nick? You're not usually guilty. Eager. Sunny in Edinburgh. Sunny here as well. So we've got lots of really good feeling coming in. Gorms, Glasgow. Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. So, and I'm keen to hear Sara's words in a second as well. If you've got any questions, use the Q&A function, but do keep them quite pithy so we can get through as many as possible. The way this is going to work, I'll have a conversation with Sara, but we'll bring questions in as and when to get as many of your voices heard and you all to take part in the conversation. So she needs little introduction, Sara Bennison. I think we all know who she is, but really delighted that she's joining us. She started her career in advertising agencies, working across a variety of major brands in the UK and Asia before going to the other side. Is it the dark side? I'm not sure. Client side at BT and then Barclays. And she joined Nationwide back in 2016 as their first ever CMO. No mean task then. Sara, come and join me.
Hello.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right. I'm just so excited I pressed the right buttons.
I know, so was I, but I actually managed to cancel everyone out and I thought I'd lost you all at the beginning, which was, you know, a good start. So what's your first word in terms of your word that describes you right now?
So I'm not sure it's a word because it's got lots of hyphens, but I'd say new normal doubt.
Does that also mean zoomed out?
A bit of Zooms, a bit more Teams in my life than Zoom, but basically sitting staring at a screen all day is, yeah. It's great in some ways, but not so much in others.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So it's fair to say we've never experienced anything like this before, this new normal. How are you finding things? And it'd be particularly good to understand, you know, some challenges that you've had, but also things you found rewarding as well.
Yeah, I know. I think these are just the weirdest of times, aren't they? And what are we up to? Is it 7 weeks of this? I don't know. Every week seems to turn into just one kind of long thing. I suppose, you know, the challenges are fairly obvious for everyone. It's frightening, it's scary. My husband was really ill with the virus, you know, quite early on in it. So we had all of that stuff, which made it very real. I think until that point, it hadn't really struck home. But, you know, like everything, there are silver linings. And I think the glorious thing about marketeers is fundamentally, we have to be optimistic people, and the next campaign's always going to be the best ever. And I think that is a really important skill to bring into businesses, or mindset to bring into businesses at the moment, all the optimistic, sunny stuff that was being posted, because through all of these things, when there's change, there's opportunity, and being able to spot that and think creatively about what to do with different ways of doing things is something that I think marketers can really bring to the table.
I love that. And talking of campaigns, you've launched a campaign recently, haven't you, which very much
Yes.
focuses on, you know, COVID and beyond. So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so we had we had a little bit of a problem, frankly, and I suppose this is what it means about kind of turning a problem into something good. So we had a whole host of airtime booked, combination of comedy artists talking about saving for ISAs and advertising for older members around later life mortgages. And then all of a sudden overnight, comedy and saving didn't really seem quite the things that you needed to be talking about. And we couldn't sell later life products because you can't do it over the telephone, or couldn't at that point. All of these things changing. And so we, in the short term, had a dilemma. And actually what we did quietly in the background was give that airtime to Shelter, who are long-term partners for us, and they, you know, seeing their funding really reduced. So that was great for them. But then, of course, you're kind of going, well, what do you say as a brand through this? You know, we've all had lots of "I really care about you" letters from everybody's CEO arrive in your inbox, but they don't necessarily feel very authentic. And so fortunately with the campaign we work with some amazingly talented poets, comedians, the full works. And we got in touch with them and said, you know, this thought of what would we have learned for this if we frame it as what would you tell yourself in 6 months' time? What would come back? And they, you know, they shot themselves. It came back and had us all in tears for different reasons, and just felt like the right thing to kind of capture a mood. But as I said, it wasn't what we planned to do in the slightest. And so I think that ability to kind of go, oh dear, that's a problem. How are we going to move out of it? And how can we get some good to come out of this problem? You know, was very much what drove us.
I love that. That's a brilliant example of pivoting. And what I also love is that you had a Funny Woman winner of 2019, who was our annual dinner host, Laura Smith, featured, didn't you?
Yeah, and she was brilliant. I love her one, though. You know, as a piece of film, I think hers is probably best. But my heart is with the couple, Matt and Maria. They're getting married, and the reason why is we've worked with them both before, and they actually met each other for the first time at a nationwide event where we had lots of poets doing poetry stuff. They'd never met each other before. They met, fell in love, and are getting married later in the year. So it's a nationwide marriage.
That's such a great story. I love that, and I love poetry stuff. That's brilliant as well. so
we do a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. So let's take you back. We're interested just to hear a little bit more about you. So you've had an interesting career, as I mentioned at the beginning. You started agency side, you worked with lots of different clients, but give us some background on you.
Oh gosh, well, I think you've kind of done the highlights of it. I suppose if we go even further back, the thing that's the thread through it all is ever since I was a little girl, I loved reading, but also I loved writing. I loved telling stories. And I didn't quite know what kind of career, a storytelling career would be, because obviously you think about, you know, I'm going to write a novel, not really finished one ever, or, you know, be a journalist, or those kind of things. And then I sort of stumbled into advertising being effectively about telling stories. And so that's kind of been the thing all the way through, and it's still true, even though the job I do now is a bit different from writing a novel. So I suppose that's the common thread. And I think it's funny for people who I've known in different phases of life, you know, for the last 10, 11 years, I've worked in financial services. I arrived the week before Lehman's collapsed, never having worked in financial services before. So I kind of arrived in a crisis, and I think this is probably my third. But in my heart of hearts, although I look to the untrained eye like a financial services marketing and product and proposition person, I suppose I'm still at the heart of it, a kind of storytelling, advertising person.
Love that. So what's been the defining moment in your career, would you say? Or your proudest moment?
Oh gosh. I don't know, because they're not actually the things that are defining moments are really built around the teams I've worked with. I think those are the things that you really remember, aren't they? Times when you've worked with great people, either in your own organisation or when I was agency side with clients, or vice versa, this way. And, you know, having teams that coalesce and work well and produce things and can do things like the 6 months campaign, you know, from a distance in a week, you know, that's the kind of stuff that you feel proud of, although pride is a, you know, deadly sin. So I don't like to dwell on pride too much, but there's certainly, and I think in terms of defining moments, it's almost when those conditions for success are set up with the right people, the right place, the right time, then success sort of follows, because you know, all of those things are just gelling together. All of this, you know, what we do is all a team sport, isn't it? It's not an individual sport. So I think that's certainly the way I think about it.
Always. I love that. I mean, one of the highlights has got to be when you won our Grand Prix last year.
I know, that was lovely. That was really lovely, and really nice. You know, really nice for the team, and particularly for the thing that it was, because it was something that a lot of people tried very hard to convince us was the terrible idea.
So just explain what it was, because essentially you called out the social media trolls, didn't you, by using your previous campaign?
Yeah, so again, I suppose, and it's another example, though I'd not thought about it that way, of how you take unexpected things and things that look on the face of them to be big problems and turn them into something else. So I think one of the things with the Voices campaign, so the different poets and everything, we obviously have a lot of different voices and faces as part of that campaign. You know, we made 40 films, I think, in the first year that it ran. And one of the things that really early on I noticed, because in that time, remember that time when we used to have to go to offices? Not that time, 8 weeks ago. So because Nationwide's head office is in Swindon, I live in London, so a couple of times a week I'd be there really early in the morning beating the traffic, and so was our person, you know, quite a junior person running, you know, going through the things that had been caught in the social media filter overnight for vanities, and what she was doing was deleting them, because that's what perceived wisdom was, is, you know, the filters caught it, delete it, don't give oxygen to the trolls. And I said, have you seen anything different in this? And she said, oh yes, and look at this, look at what we're seeing. And it really, really shocked me, because when we ran ads that featured someone who was black, someone who wasn't straight, perish the thought, someone who was a young woman, or the singing sisters, the stuff we saw through was just hideous. And you just thought, you know, if this was happening in real life in front of me, would I want to be the kind of person that didn't call it out and didn't turn around? Because doesn't that somehow make you complicit in kind of going, I'm just going to ignore it, which sort of implies it's okay, and it just isn't okay. And I felt really, really strongly about it. So, you know, wrote an article from campaign about it. At the time I was vice president of ISBA, so did some work on protocols and things around how we think about this differently. And then it all kind of, so that was fine and was kind of going along in the background, and then it all got a bit more momentum when the singing sisters had death threats, and we took that to the police, because we thought, you know, it's an ad for a building society with two girls singing a song. I mean, it's not really the kind of thing that, and they were really explicit as well. It's vile. Anyway, all of this stuff had happened, and then you kind of go, well, what do we want to do about this next? And we realised it was something, you know, you can't tackle it on your own. So we went to Channel 4 and said, look, any thoughts on what we can do? They came up with a brilliant idea of really calling it out over a whole evening of programming with some research that they'd done. And we got some other brands involved as well, who were brave enough to put together an ad break where you have our ads, and then, you know, over the top of it, what was said about the people in them, and they were the nice things by comparison.
Really?
And the difference that made, it was at that point in the debate where, you know, there's a lot of defensiveness on the part of the social media companies, and there was also a lot of blaming of the social media companies as if it was only their fault. I mean, it isn't. That's like saying, I don't know, you build a street with not enough street lamps, therefore it is only the town planner's fault that people are mugged on it, not the people doing the mugging. You know, this is a collective responsibility. It's something we need to share, and it really helped kickstart that debate, and also move it from being, you know, a nationwide issue that we're calling out to something that was broader than that, and on it's gone from there. So yeah, so that was a proud moment for the team. But there were people who, you know, were strongly advising not to do it at the beginning for fear of making this seem like Nationwide's problem. You know, your campaign's not working, your ads aren't liked, you know, all of those things, you know, all backfire on the brand. So I was really lucky. I've got a really supportive board, really supportive CEO who, when I said what had happened, were like, you know, go for it, we can't stand by, you know, we'll be there.
I love that, and doing the right thing. And actually, when we did a showcase for the award winners, and we had Paul in your team talk about this particular story, he said it was very much you that was leading it and championing it and made it happen. And that's really brave when other people wouldn't. And I think he even admitted he was against it, but he knows it was the wrong thing. And I
it's
love
all right.
that.
That's how it works in the team. Most of the time they win, just to be clear. I'm usually more often than not overruled.
Yeah, but I love this. You're generally a lot described as someone that really wants to make a difference, which is admirable and important. I think as an industry, we've not just got an opportunity, we've got a responsibility with everything that we have available to us as marketeers. What do you think is the most important thing for us as marketing leaders that we can be doing right now for our teams and our customers?
Yeah, I think, in the same way that the same things as we always should be doing, they're just kind of speeded up somehow and harder to do. So I think kind of really listening and understanding where the pain points are actually for colleagues, for businesses that have got face-to-face in particular interaction or voice-to-voice interaction with customers. It's a really tough time for them. So listening and understanding colleagues, listening and understanding members in our case, because they're members of the building society, not customers, is just really important, and not forgetting to ask how people are feeling. Any of the sort of mistakes we've made along the line, or things that over the last few weeks, or things that you wish you'd done differently, were often because we were looking at facts and data and we weren't taking into account feelings. And that's the part that the marketers need to bring to the equation, because when you take into account the feelings backed up with the data, then that's when you get the opportunity to do something different. And I suppose behind the 6 month thing, one of the things that was really startling of feelings of colleagues as well as members was just a lack of hope. They needed a bit of hope. And the 6 month device, not only for the campaign that we did, but then what's followed on internally with people talking, sorry, that's the dog being taken out for a walk and the door slamming very, very loudly. So internally it really struck a chord too, and it allowed people to see where the small things are that they could hang on to that were hope, but also have a mechanism for saying, some of this is just crap and I feel crap, and don't pretend that it's all magical and marvellous every day as well. So I suppose that's what, and it's the same as ever, listen to the insight, but I just think it's much more nuanced. It's much more nuanced because none of us have been here before. You can't see a pattern that you can rely on and go, oh, well, the last time this happened, we did X and it was fine. We're in uncharted territory.
We certainly are. And there's you just reminded me when you were talking there that there's something Ruby Wax said at one of our events, which I've quoted a lot of times since. It's okay not to be okay. And actually, sometimes it's just so important to be able to say, actually, I'm not having a good day, or I'm having a tough time. And us as leaders need to encourage those spaces to have those conversations, don't we? And
I think so. Yeah. So I write. Anyway, always, or for years and years and years, I've written a note to whatever team was my team at that time on a Friday, and the nature of that over the last few weeks has been really interesting and difficult to write, because before that it was like, oh, I've been here, done that, went to this meeting, here are some interesting things, and well done to so and so, and this is someone's new baby. It was a sort of format, if you like, and personal to a degree, but much more not scripted because I write it myself, but much more sort of thought about, and much less authentic actually, in terms of really what I was thinking and feeling during the week. And I just thought, through this, it's really important to be really honest. So I've ditched all the sort of strategy stuff and those kind of things. We've got plenty of opportunities to do that and talk much more about those kind of arcs of feeling, and that's really important. And actually the one I wrote last week, I did write about, it's been for some reason last week for a lot of us, and they're coming back in because they obviously haven't got the dog. Honestly.
Hello, doggy.
Exactly. Sorry.
No, you're good.
The one I wrote last week was, I actually I don't usually think about it or share it with people before, but was much more honest about it's been a bit of a rubbish week. I don't know why it's been a rubbish week. To the untrained eye, I've had more rubbish weeks through this, but I just felt a bit glum and down, and that's not like me. And then it sort of talked myself back up into what was right. And it was so interesting because I had more response to that from people who work in my team than anything, because they were saying it felt like it had been a bit rubbish all round. Everyone was getting a bit stressed with each other. Members are getting grumpier with staff. That all of this stuff is kind of going on. But by giving people the permission to kind of go, it's okay to not be okay, they also felt much better as a result, because you don't feel on your own. And it's so easy to feel on your own. We're all, in a little bubble on our own, and that's not easy sometimes.
I love that. Thank you. So what do you think's been your biggest learning so far? You've had a brilliant career, and I know it's quite difficult to boil that down to one. So if you've got a couple, but I think what you just said about the human side of leadership is so important. But what else do you think's been your biggest learning so far? And guys, get your questions ready. Ideally, put them on the Q&A, because I'll start opening up to questions. I see there's one already in there, I think, from Richard, which we'll ask in a sec.
I don't know. I suppose for me, I think it took me quite a long time to get started and to build my confidence. And actually, it's probably the thing I still have to work on most, which sounds a bit daft probably, but definitely feels that way. And I think certainly in the early years of my career, I kind of thought, well, if I work really hard and put my head down, then I'll do well, which to an extent, when you're in a junior position, that does work well. But it took me a long time to kind of make that leap and have the confidence to be the person that, sits in a meeting and goes, well, if you bring this all together, how about this? Or to lead, I suppose. And I think that took me quite a long while to get there. And so I wish I'd had that confidence a bit earlier, because I'll always wonder, well, what would I have achieved if I'd worked that out a bit sooner? So yeah, I suppose that's the main one. And I think it's also just that recognition that, trying to have a career path that is plotted and kind of try and make your next move on the basis of what looks good on a piece of paper. Those have been the things which have been the wrong moves to make. Although, as is life, there's always a reason and it sort of works out in the end. But making a decision on the basis of something that's intellectually right, but actually didn't really feel inspired by the people or the brand or the task or whatever it may be, doesn't work. Because I've found that unless I'm doing something that I've got a passion for, with people I love working with and for, then you don't do nearly such a good job. And so what you think is a brilliant move turns out to be a pretty pants one. And I think that's the other thing that I've learned, is always evaluated on those things, not what everyone's telling you will look good on your CV.
I love that. It's reminding me of the Steve Jobs quote that he did in his Stanford speech, and I often quote him, so apologies members if you've heard me say this before, but you've got to love what you do, and it's only when you love what you do you'll be truly exceptional.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And it's so easy, and it's easy to talk, even, forget other people, it's easy to talk yourself out of it and go, oh, this would make an awful lot of sense, I'm going to get paid more money, and I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. And those things never quite work out so well, I don't think.
This is so true, so true. Right, we've got questions coming in. So Richard's question's been there for quite a while. Richard, you're not following my thing about a pithy question. However, I will try and ask it. You've experienced working at creative agencies and brands, and in a previous Marketing Society interview, I like the fact you're quoting us, thank you, summarised bold marketing leadership as having the courage of your convictions and resisting the safety net of simply beating the category norm. I love that. Would you say the same to brands, marketers and agency leaders now? Kind of touched on that a little bit already, haven't we? But
yeah, absolutely. And it's also, I think, just realising the kind of huge, well, it goes back to this point about not talking down the value of marketing and marketers and agencies and creativity, either side of the fence of what we do. I just think it's really important, because it's very easy to, and we're complicit in this, it's very easy to kind of go, oh, we just do the nice stuff. We do much more than that. So, the point I was making before about, understanding the emotional part as well as the rational part, and how do you respond to that? How do you communicate? What are the ideas that can get you out of a difficult position? How do you approach things to be distinctive? All of those things are hugely important, and that's what comes from these communities, and businesses fail without it, and they fail even faster in times like this. So yes, absolutely stick by that one.
Lovely. And we've got questions coming in thick and fast, so I'll ask a couple more before we go back
I'm going to
our...
listen to you rather than try and read them, because otherwise
Yeah,
I can't,
no, definitely.
can't
As it is,
manage
I
that.
can't multitask, which lots of our members know, so bear with me as well. I love this question from Nick Elliott, who, if I'm not mistaken, had his profile done on our LinkedIn event last week. So he said, if telling stories is something you've done in all of your roles, storytelling, what do you feel your purpose is?
Oh, blimey.
It's a big question, but it's a great question. We can go back to it if you
I
want
suppose
to.
my purpose, I don't know, I suppose the purpose in the context of storytelling, in a way, you sometimes think, well, you're not chief marketing officer, you're chief editor for an organisation. And how do you, I think, it's also about, I suppose, understanding the things that, all of us have unique strengths and things that we're not so great at. And I suppose understanding that, which for me is being able to kind of pull, insight, business data, market data, creative ideas, and kind of go, well, if you put that all together, what's the thing? So I think for me, that being able to assimilate different things, but then be really clear about, well, this is the outcome we want to get to, and therefore how you're going to bring people with you and make that outcome come true, I suppose is what I feel that I can bring. And then clearly others bring lots of other stuff that complement that, and that I'm in awe of around the rest of the table.
And I was just going to say that all of your different members of team that I've met would absolutely say that that's your skill. So it's good to hear that that's your purpose. Interestingly, you just mentioned you changed your job title. So I'm going to jump to the question that I had around something I read, which I loved, where you talked about how important the value of marketing is. And you referred specifically to job titles in that marketing is becoming more and more about fashion and self-promotion, and less about marketing. And actually, let's have marketing in the title. So would you just give a bit more explanation about that?
Yeah. So I mean, I've got so my job has grown in ways that people go, well, that's much bigger than marketing, because I've got product, I've got proposition, I've got P&L responsibility. I've currently got branch and contact centre responsibility through the crisis as well. I've got lots of things that aren't marketing, except for me, keeping marketing as a core part of my title externally. It doesn't matter internally because we don't use those kind of things, but externally felt really important, because otherwise you're saying, well, since when has price, proposition, promotion, positioning not been part of what marketing is? I think we've just kind of let go of lots of those things. And then there's partly that of just sort of going, don't undersell what marketing is, and there's partly just a related thing, but coming at it a different way of, oh, well, I'm going to change my title to chief something fancy named officer. You go, well, why can't you just say that you're doing marketing? Why do you have to put all these other words in there? And I know it's really hard, and I've probably got a whole host of chief growth officers out there or whatever, but you just kind of go, well, if it's not about growth, then what is it? And all of those sort of things, and they feel to me as ways that you kind of have to apologise for what you do, and it is really hard. And in some circumstances I have to insert another word alongside the marketing word in there. No, you can't have a plate. I'm in the middle. That's the thing. Can I have a plate? I'm in my study. There isn't a plate. This is what happens. But I think that kind of whole bit of trying to, when I'm having to do it, I'm having to add it in, because you're dealing with audiences who just go, oh, marketing, and slightly sniffingly go, she can't have a proper job. She can't be responsible, really. Is she really responsible for all of this stuff when she's only the marketing person? And so, it's a little battle I'm fighting myself, but it'd be really nice if some other people could join me.
Well, you've already got people joining you on this. We've had from Margaret saying, totally agree. It's no need to apologise for the value of marketing. And I think you'll have many more people that feel similar. Got lots more questions coming in, so I'm going to continue with those. From anonymous attendee, don't know why they don't want to say their name, but there we go. What has been the key trait that made you successful, and how do you think COVID will change things? So I guess it's slightly different to the purpose question.
It is, and I don't really know. I find all these kind of personal things a bit tricky, because you just don't, well, A, you don't think of yourself as successful, which is a starting problem on that, and B, then you don't really analyse it. But I suppose, I mean, maybe one of the things I said before is I am a silver lining kind of glass half full kind of person generally. Last week was a bit of a blip, and we're all allowed those in this.
Absolutely.
And I think that's probably it. It's kind of, like, I was talking around the genesis of Together Against Hate, or the 6-month campaign, or those are all things that came out of a problem. And so being able to go, okay, this is the problem. What's an interesting way, a creative way out of said problem? I think is probably it, because I think that just also really helps people in teams, because when you're in a dark time, you do want somebody to have some vague sense of a plan that makes everyone feel a bit better, if nothing else. And once people feel a bit better, things kind of get better anyway, and it sorts itself out. So I think there's probably a sort of inherent optimism or search for a solution that that is helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Which is just as well.
I love it. Glass half full. It's so important. Question from Dan in the chat. Are you seeing other brands take inspiration from the nationwide work? And are you hoping it will change the way other businesses approach their marketing?
Oh goodness, I don't really know. I suppose, I'm not hoping it helps the people we're competing with, because after all, we are trying to. The reason we're doing the things that we're doing as well is take advantage of the things that are unique and special about us, to do that. So I think the important thing is, and it goes back to this point about not being ashamed of being a marketeer, is just producing the best work you possibly can, whichever brand you're in, putting that little bit of effort and thought and creativity and inspiration and difference into it. Because the better the work is across the industry, the more effective it will be, and the more that sort of virtuous spiral of why marketing is valuable starts to be understood again within businesses, in the way that it was when brands were invented. It was totally understood then. So I think that's what I hope, is that people find the conditions. And I think what's quite interesting, sometimes people approach me and say, oh, I'm trying desperately to get my board to agree to do some clever thing from a brand perspective, and they won't do it, and they keep wanting to do this awful, boring, terrible thing. What's your advice? And so helping people work out how to have those conversations, and how to create the conditions for work to be made that you can be really proud of, and that also powers a business, and then you get into a virtuous circle, is a really important thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that there'll be a lasting impact, and this question from Paul, but it kind of goes on from what you're just saying, on the crisis, or this crisis that we're having currently, on your digital strategy, products and services?
So it's a really good question, and it's a very nuanced question, and I think none of us really quite know the answer to some of these things, because on the face of it, you could say the whole world turns digital now, on the basis that we're doing this way. Why would you ever have an event again where people sit together and have a glass of wine and a chat? Why would you do it? You could say, why would anyone ever walk into a branch again if they can do it all on an app? You could say that. I don't think that's right, because I think what this has taught us even more is all of these things are really important. They're huge lifelines, and we should be using them more. To in my case, spend less time on the M4, more time with my family. Those are great things, but it doesn't mean, in fact, it means the reverse. I think humanity and contact and community and closeness and high street all become so much more important. So all of us in merrily saying, oh, the death of the high street, who needs that? Where would we all be if we couldn't walk to somewhere that could sell you some food? Yeah. It's horrific. What are the things we were laughing before? What are the things you're missing? You're missing the hairdresser around the corner.
Hugely.
You're missing being able to, go out with the mums on a Friday night and drink a bit too much in the local pub. And those are the things, actually, for me, when you talk to people, the things when you say, what do you want to do when you come out of the lockdown first? It's not get on a plane and go to the other side of the world. It is meet my mates in the pub down the road for a drink, have my hair cut, go to Swindon to Nationwide and see my team on a Thursday when the Indian chefs do the homemade curry You know, all of a sudden those things become, it's top tip if you ever want a meeting with us. Thursday's the day usually.
Well, we've been trying to get a meeting for a while, so it's good to know.
They know what I'm doing. I'm meeting Kerry on a Thursday. That's it. But I think it's all those things. They are the little things and they're the close things. And I think that's what's going to be really interesting, is that interplay coming out of this. Is in some ways you value both more. So you would value digital interaction more because, you know, we wouldn't be able to operate as businesses. You know, everything would be a disaster. You value that more, but you value closeness, connection, human contact, and your local community even more too. So I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it actually plays out, and it's not as binary as I think, you know, some might think.
I think one of the gorgeous things that's come out of this is that connectivity with your community and neighbourhoods, and that so many people I've spoken to have said, you know, I didn't know my neighbours before, I knew 5 of them, and now I know, you know, the whole street. And I know, especially with ours, we've got a WhatsApp group, and I've never ever spoken so much to my neighbours.
We never had it before. A couple of us were in church, and now we've got, you know, WhatsApp group that's keeping us, well, literally in our case, kept us alive. You know, when my husband was ill and we had, you know, we wouldn't have eaten, we couldn't go anywhere, you know, and you know, that reliance on, you know, the people closest to you, physically closest to you, is huge.
Huge.
And I think that's what's interesting. I think that's what's interesting coming out of this is, it's going to be a different picture. And in some ways, when you start talking about it that way, or you start talking about some of the environmental impacts of the way that we're living, you know, all of those things, you know, it's a massive shock to the system and change in behaviour. And there's some awful things about it, but there's some incredibly precious lessons that I think we've all learnt, and we mustn't let go of.
Agree. Like moments of kindness and generosity, especially things like the Thursday clap, you know, it's become a thing. Except my son, who's 4, he always says when we go out, he says, again.
It's the only thing that means I know what day of the week it is. 8 o'clock on a Thursday. It's the only time with any certainty I know where I am.
Yeah, it's so true, so true. So the clap's been replaced by the curry for now, but we'll go back to the curry. Right, we've got loads more questions coming in. We're gonna love this. We've got Fran from Weetabix. Hello, Fran. I have lots of your Weetabix in my house because big fan. And she sent me lots as well, which is brilliant. How do you strike the right balance at the board table between in-year delivery of financial performance and further outgrowth? Sorry, that's quite a big question after talking about neighbourhood.
It is quite a big question. It's a really important one. And I suppose for me, it's been one of the most interesting lessons about moving to a mutual organisation from working in or with PLCs for ever before, is I've really learned what I've always known to be true, that the two are not mutually exclusive. Indeed, because a mutual tends to, obviously we're all in weird times and everything's kind of like what's happening in the next 2 minutes, but a mutual looks longer term. It's not bound on quarterly reporting in the same way. It's, you know, doubling profit would be the wrong thing to do because you've got to find a way of balancing the right amount of profit with everything else. It is different, but as a result you take a longer term focus. And you know what the irony of the longer term focus is the brand that performs, or until all of this nonsense started, but was, you know, for the last 3 years, 4 years, has performed best in the shortest term decision in our market of current accounts, and the most easily kind of movable has been us. So the more long term the thinking, the better the short term the answer, because you're investing consistently in your brand, the story around that brand, the actions that bring that to life. You know, all of that stuff actually drives short term success. And I think the danger is it's hard to prove that until you've done it, because it's much easier to go, well, I've got this many clicks and I've got this model that's showing me this and that. It's very hard to prove until you've done it that, you know, tackling hatred or, you know, talking about life in 6 months' time is going to flow through to a business benefit. And that's where you need marketeers who are trusted in the business. And I suppose that's where the Brave agenda really kind of fits in, is you have to be able to take people with you, because then you prove that's right. And it's not then an either or debate. I don't have an either or debate. A strong brand is what propels our business forward day to day, as is, you know, some of the more tactical things that we do to drive, you know, a particular shape to that business, depending on, you know, what we need to do. So I would never see them as an either or put them in opposition to each other. And I get really grumpy when people talk about brand versus performance marketing, because it kind of assumes, it's a bit like the marketing, why are you a chief marketing officer, not a growth officer debate. It sort of assumes brand isn't performance. But, what is a brand if it's not about performance? It's the ultimate in performance, I think.
I like that. Can't imagine you being grumpy though, but very much like that.
It doesn't happen very often, and if there were any of my team, actually, I don't think even Nationwide have necessarily. Actually, they might have seen me. I get really grumpy once every 3 years, and it becomes the stuff of folklore apparently, but only once every 3 years. Don't worry, it won't happen now.
Love that, thank you. We've been talking a lot about together and collaboration, so it's a good question in here around your agency partners. Have you really found that they've demonstrated their strengths in the current situation in the last few weeks? And I'm assuming definitely with the voices.
Oh, definitely, but also I think the really important thing is, because we're strong partners anyway, I never think or use the word supplier, and that's maybe because I came from that side of the fence. They're not. They're partners. They're part of the team, and that's how you get the best from agencies. Don't get the. I know because I work there. You get the best from agencies of getting the best people to want to work on your piece of business, and that's about creating the environment to do great work and have fun, and that's really important. And recognising the value of that, not go chasing around people now trying to worry people about fees and all that kind of stuff. Just don't do it. These are smaller businesses, some of them, who need certainty, and but also it's just it's a brilliant team, and I love and regard the BCCP and Wavemaker teams as much as my team is my team. They are my team. We're all in it together.
I love that. I'm sure that will be music to a lot of agencies' ears, what you just said about fees as well. I'm just going to move on because I'm aware of time, and I want to talk about a bit more about marketing. And what do you think is the biggest opportunity for marketing right now?
Oh gosh, well, there's a very obvious one. So unless some miracle happens, we're about to enter, have entered, but we just haven't seen it yet because we've not been outside, a massive recessionary period that none of us know what the shape of it looks like, because it's not like anything else we've had before. So if you follow all the economists, is it a V, a U, a W, a Bath, an L-shaped recession? God only knows, but it basically doesn't look very pretty. And I think that, that is the challenge. Business has to come out of hibernation, and business has to get going again, and it's going to have to get going in a way that inevitably will be different, and we don't know how different, how long some of those differences will be, and that will obviously vary across sector. But I think actually through this, the kind of brands, because sometimes I get asked, which brands through this have inspired you most, and actually a lot of it has been around small businesses, local small businesses who've had to adapt to thrive and carry on and survive, and how you see that in kind of locally targeted Instagram, Facebook, that sort of stuff. That I think is really inspiring. That's where marketers need to look. All the restaurants that have set up delivery businesses, all the catering, supply companies that have started selling direct to households or streets or however they're doing it. Our gardening company working out that actually they didn't have to furlough everyone as long as they focused on the clients with side access to gardens, and door dropped other houses with side access to gardens, because they could do that now, and then they can work. The schemes to prepay vouchers for meals that you're going to have out at your favourite restaurant to keep them going, all of that stuff. That's what marketing is really about, because they are having to do it, because it's their business, it's on the line, and they're fighting for it. And I think those of us who work in bigger organisations and bigger brands, it's the same. And those are the places that, to me, I take my inspiration for, of going, right, this is what marketing is about. This is about getting the business, the economy, society, people up and thriving again as quickly as we possibly can, with whatever it is that we're facing coming out the other end of this. And we've got a really important role as an industry to play in that, within the industries we operate in.
Yeah, reminded me of I read about a hairdresser who kept his business alive by getting his customers, his loyal customers, to buy gift vouchers, and
Yeah.
he said that actually saved his business in these times as he looks to open again very shortly. Not in this country, I think he was in Greece or somewhere.
Yeah.
I wish he was in this country because I want the hairdressers to open again. If I haven't made
I
that,
know it's quite near the top of everyone's list, and the homemade haircuts of the men have been providing us with endless, or not haircuts, endless entertainment on Teams calls at work.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been described as a brave marketing leader on many an occasion by your teams, by us, by the industry. What does brave leadership mean to you?
So I don't think of it as brave, and sometimes brave can kind of seem reckless. But
Yeah.
I suppose
That was my next question.
What makes it seem brave maybe is just working out what you think the right thing to do is, which is sometimes complicated because there are lots of nuances in what right means, and having the courage of your convictions to get on and do it and take people with you, and not in a sort of, right, this is it and there's no, nothing's going to sway me from it. I don't think that helps because you learn a lot through it, but just kind of being ambitious, I suppose, in what you think you can tackle and not being cowed by something being wrong. How can you take something that's a problem, turn it into a good thing? How can you take the resources that you've got as a business and the skills that you've got and turn them into something more powerful? And I think that's what it's about, because then it doesn't feel very brave because it just feels obvious.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing. If I thought I was being brave, I wouldn't do it. I'm the most scaredy cat person in the entire known universe. But once it just seems obvious, then you just kind of crack on and do it, and people agree and they join in, and ideas get born and made better and things happen.
That. So you mentioned when things go wrong. So what advice would you give to other marketers or generally other people who messed up, and how do you bounce back?
So I think the people bit is interesting because one of the things I still am really bad at, but I'm better than I was, is the endless torturing of yourself, of that horrible feeling inside, going, oh, why did I do that? Or why didn't I do that? And oh, that's so embarrassing, and kind of toe curling, and I just want to hide away in the earth to swallow me up. And I think, I suppose what you learn in time is things do go wrong, big things go wrong. Big things go wrong in the world, big things go wrong in life. And always those things which at the time seemed dreadful, if you sort of can helicopter above yourself and out a few years, you learn something, don't you? All of these things in retrospect, you think, oh, well, thank goodness I cocked that up, because if I hadn't cocked that up, I wouldn't have learned that, which is, otherwise that's presented a bigger cock up further down the line, or I've learned something that has unlocked a better idea, or, in admitting a failure to someone, I showed a vulnerability that meant that and an honesty that meant that they wanted to help me and help me overcome that. So I think that's the thing, is all these things are only feel like failure and cock up in the moment. With the benefit of hindsight, they sort of all fit into place in a story, don't they? Or they do to me, because I like to tell a story out of everything. So maybe that's the answer.
I love that.
But you know what it's like. You look back, it's like, all the disastrous relationships that you have before you find the right one. At the time you cry your eyes out and it's a nightmare. But actually, they will teach you something, don't they, and make you who you are. And I think it's just having that view is helpful.
Yeah, no, I love that. And get through quite a lot of frogs to find your prince, they say, or your princess.
You certainly do.
In every way in life. We've got another question coming in the Q&A, I suppose, which relates to that. What piece of leadership advice were you given that's stayed with you that you think could help the next generation of marketers?
Oh, gosh. Well, for those of you who come agency side and have grown up agency side, the concept of leadership or any training in how to do said thing, certainly when I was doing it, was just non-existent. So I think it's more about it's less about kind of words of wisdom and more about behaviours that I watched and learned from. And again, I suppose this plays a bit to the long term and the short term thing. The people who didn't do the right thing, who screwed other people over in a desperate scramble for their own career and their own self-interest, might have worked for them for a year or 2 or 5. And you kind of go, but where are they now at the end of it, because it's not very sustainable. And I think that's the thing for me is, again, it's just taking that perspective that takes you out of the day-to-day and kind of go, you know, I'd rather be a bit slower at this, but be able to live with myself and, you know, have the respect to the people that I care about, than go the fast route and not have that. I think that's for me.
Be kind.
Be kind. Be kind.
Love that, love that. Right, we're soon to wrap up, so if people have got questions, get them in now and I will try and answer a couple more. But look into the future. I've got two more for myself as well. Look into the future, and particularly now, given that the times that we're in. But what do you think the marketing department will look like?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because even just saying the words marketing department conjures up the thought, and it makes me quite sad, because it conjures up the thought of being in fact there with my team and everyone having a laugh and some cake and chat and gossip and all the things that you miss, and curry, all the things that you really miss about not being together with each other. So, you know, I don't know, what will it look like? I mean, in some ways, I don't know, to me it looks the same year on year. I remember when I first started as a grad at JWT and was put on the Roundtrees account, which they'd had even then for, God, 50, 60 years. And I had the key to the chocolate cupboard, which made me very popular and got me definitely for the first 2 promotions. That was easy. I had the key to the chocolate cupboard. But I also had the key to the archives, and I love history as well as words. And you'll see that some of the campaigns we do. I love history because often you find the answer in history, and just going back and reading some of the letters when some of those kind of really iconic brands like, you know, Black Magic were created in letters from London, Berkeley Square to York and back again. You know, actually the skills there that you were reading about were pretty much the same, you know, understanding a commercial desire and a market and how it was operating, understanding the capabilities of what products you could build and what could you do differently and what shapes could you make them and fill them with, understanding names that would resonate with people, understanding how to communicate that, bring it to life with ideas, you know, all of those things, they're just kind of the same. We've just got different tools that we can use to do it. So although the sort of I don't know, technical expertise of how you bring some of these things to life changes over time, the fundamental things that you're looking for in marketeers, to me, are the same as, you know, they ever were: a kind of commercial acumen, lateral thinking, persistence, determination, and a sort of optimism that it'll all somehow work out in the end. You know, that's the same.
Nice. And just to finish with, obviously you did the campaign where people were looking at their COVID story, and in 6 months' time, what would you like your COVID story to be after this?
Well, I suppose personally, I'd like to remember the things that have been good about this, and actually slowing down a little bit and appreciating the small things and home, and, you know, all of that I think is important. And I suppose professionally, kind of, I don't know, finding a way through that can keep giving our members hope and security, and therefore keep them wanting to be our members, so that we kind of, you know, I'm very conscious I'm a custodian of a brand that's been around, well, and a movement that's been around for a very long time, and that takes it and shepherds it into the next era. How we do that, Lord only knows. That's the problem for the rest of the afternoon and the next few days, but, you know, I'm sure it will come clear in the end.
Love that. Thank you. And that's a perfect note to finish. So thank you so much, Sara. This is where I want applause from everyone, because if we didn't have
where's my glass of wine? That's how it normally works.
I know.
A glass of wine.
I know, and a hug as well. I miss hugs.
I know.
So thank you. This has been truly inspirational. I've learned a lot, and I know our members would have too, and you're going to start getting the feedback from our members already saying thank you and good things.
Oh, that's lovely. Well, it's been nice to talk about something other than prudential regulation and conduct risk for the last, because that's you know, all of the other stuff that we've been talking about. So it's been a nice change. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.